Hi guys, hope you had a great celebrations to the New Year's and thanks for joining us for the first episode of the Startup Operators Roundup for 2023. Now folks, for joining us for the first time, the Startup Operator Weekly Roundup is a show for folks like you who like to stay updated with the latest developments from the Indian startup ecosystem. And if the first time you're tuning into the channel, then do consider subscribing to it. Now, 2022, what a year it has been, right? I mean, of course, there were headwinds, there was recession, there were talks of the great resignation and the great return and whatnot,
Yeah.
right? But for me, the most memorable way the year started was with that slap by Chris Rock.
Yeah, I thought it was a parody actually. I didn't realize.
No, that actually happened. I was watching the Oscars in February on my laptop.
We watched it real time.
Yes. And like it was early in the morning and part, what a wake up call.
I always wonder who watches Oscars anymore, but well, you have the answer.
It was not only Will Smith slapping Chris Rock, but we also had the "My money don't jiggle jiggle, it flows." But that wasn't the case for
I
the
don't know what
startup
that is,
ecosystem.
but yeah.
And a huge shout out to our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Park Avenue. It's been a great year, right? What were your highlights of the year?
Well, a lot actually, but let me just start with something I was thinking of last week, which is I painfully got through watching the season 2 of Pictures. I was just struck by how much of a genius the Silicon Valley team was. I mean, the if you haven't seen it already, Silicon Valley, the series, uh, I think
It's in
perhaps available
Hotstar.
on Hotstar.
Hotstar.
Yeah, fantastic series. It's also, I mean, the creator of that is Mike Judge, and Mike Judge is the Beavis and Butthead guy.
Okay.
So he's fantastic all in all, right? He's done some other amazing movies as well, movies and series and stuff. Overall, a very creative guy. They actually focus on product development in that, right? I mean, they've made up this whole mythical Wiseman score, and they had some sort of technical engineering skills and talk and all of that stuff, right? But guess what? Guess what? Pictures focuses on
What?
funding. That's it.
Hmm.
Like be all and end all of a startup is funding. Of course, cash in the bank is the most important thing, but hey, there's no talk of what product it is, and some of it is like comical, right? I mean, they have to tie up with some mythical large enterprise called KC Enterprises, right? And it's run by this Lala kind of guy, and he wants to do a partnership with them, or rather, these guys want a partnership with them, and then he pulls out. Then
Pulls
at
out.
the end, well, pull out jokes
Always have
never
a
get
reason.
old. But yeah, I mean, it's just so ridiculous, so ridiculous. I mean, yeah, and I was just reflecting on our journey with the roundup, right? I mean, when we started the roundup, I think 2.5 years back, there was a lot of focus on funding because for us, funding was a proxy to cover sectors, for a proxy to cover innovation, proxy to cover people who are important, etc. Right? And somehow, over the last year and a half, we've kind of pivoted away from funding to a lot more industrial policy, a lot more trends, a lot more stuff that people are talking about that we should know and so on. Yeah, and I just hope that others make that similar switch as well. Because God knows there's enough you can find on funding and so on with the startup journalism anyway, right? I mean, that's all they cover. So that's going to be a continuing focus
Yeah.
in 2023 for us.
Yeah, even in this round, we'll be talking about each sector from the ecosystem and how it has evolved throughout 2022, right? So stay tuned. A lot of interesting content coming up your way. All right. So the year 2022 had a great start as compared to 2021 in terms of, having the number of unicorns that made it to the list. Within the first 3 months of this year, there were 13 startups that crossed a valuation of $1 billion as compared to 8 startups in 2021. But the tables turned very soon after that. In the year 2021, we had around 44 startups that made it to the list versus 21 of them that made the cut in this year. Right now, that's a sharp decline despite how the year began for them. Now, tell us why that happened.
Well, the simple answer obviously is that the market turned, right? I think early in the year, Minister Piyush Goyal also said that we're going to have 75 unicorns this year. Everyone was way more optimistic that this somehow will continue, but then the market conditions changed, and then we have a bit of a slowdown and a recession going into 2023, right? And so, simple answer. The amount of liquidity in the market dried up, and which is why you see this reduction in unicorns per se. But 21, I think, is still higher than maybe 2019 or 2020, I suppose, right? Which is a positive in that sense. Valuations as it is, I think let's focus on revenue. There's a lot more positive stuff happening on that front. If you follow the monetization journeys of Pratilipi, Stage, Kuku FM, and so on, I mean, it's been fantastic, right? These guys have managed to earn real revenues from content from Bharat, right? I mean, now for ages and ages, we've only heard that it's very difficult to monetize here. We're a DAO market, not an ARPU market, and so on. But for me, that was the highlight. The highlight that the beginning of a trend is kind of shaping up on that front. So that's something to be really really excited about, I should say.
So yeah, in 2021 we had 62 new funds that launched, and that they had raised over $6 billion in capital, a majority of which still needs to be invested as we enter this new year. And there are a lot of strong signals for the ecosystem as well. We did see early stage funding not decline that much, and even for companies that are in the growth stage, their conversations are focusing more towards profitability, right? And I think that's good news for investors.
Yeah. So there weren't a lot of growth stage fundraisers last year. Obviously, I mean, you didn't see check sizes of 50 million, 100 million, and so on. And of course, I mean, a number of IPOs declined as well, right? Because nobody wants to list in this kind of environment. Although, I mean, a couple of interesting companies have filed their DHRP, right? Mama Earth, for example.
Latest one, yeah.
Yeah, the latest one.
So interesting fact about Mama Earth, right? That was the first unicorn of 2022 and the last company to apply for IPO in 2020.
Amazing. Yeah, we should have the founders on the podcast sometime, that might be interesting.
So not only Mama Earth, right? I think all the IPOs that deferred their plans this year, like Snapdeal, Oyo, MobiKwik, and even Byju's, right? They might be going public next year. But interesting to note here that these companies are still all loss making, right? And we have seen the kind of beating the market has given to the likes of Nykaa, Paytm, and
You
all.
certainly can't list at a premium in the market anymore. You're seeing it in the private markets also, right? Klarna, for example, earlier this year took a cut of 60% on their previous valuation. So you're going to see a lot of these companies list at more tempered valuations. You can't raise those 5 billion, 6 billion type of
So
valuations in the public markets, I think.
okay, so that was the highlights of the IPO markets. But for SaaS market, the year has been pretty sassy. It was a mixed bag.
I know we've been waiting to use that term for quite a while, but yeah, anyway. So Indian SaaS, as I've mentioned earlier, I think it's a decadal trend, maybe not decadal also. I mean, I think 3 or 4 decades in the making, I should say. Right, with the wide base of IT talent that we've had, we've gradually progressed from building, some of the back-end stuff, whether it is supply chain software, some kind of ERP, account management, whatever types of software, to productizing and being the front end of things, right? So you see, stuff like Freshworks, ChargeBee, and the likes, Waymo, and so on, right? I mean, these are world-class software being built out of India, and more importantly, not just built, being sold from India to the world, right? So I think Indian SaaS is a genie out of the bottle situation. Indian startups itself is that, but I think Indian SaaS in particular, I think we're only just starting, I should say. And so these funding cycles, sure, I mean, I think some of it was affected, but then I mean, considering that SaaS companies do have recurring revenue, they have net retention, and they have healthy economics in some sense, right? We didn't see too much of an effect on these folks, right? I mean, of course, the likes of Freshworks, ChargeBee, bunch of others have laid off people, but that I think is a minor correction in comparison to let's say the likes of Byju's, for instance, or even some of the consumer companies.
See, the biggest challenge for SaaS companies, I think, given the valuations they raised their previous rounds, that I think they just need to grow into that before the next fundraise.
See, no one was pricing in the execution risk. When you raise at a 60x multiple, I mean, that's just a crazy, crazy execution risk for you going forward, right? I mean, if you're going to top that valuation. And I think, it's good that, we have some sense of, sanity return, so that people are actually like thinking about, hey, how are we going to get to like 2x or 3x or, 4x of whatever, God forbid, 4x of whatever revenue over the next year, because ultimately, I mean, these are not spreadsheet stuff, right? I mean, someone has to actually build and someone has to sell. And that's not as simple as doing spreadsheet projections.
Yeah. Okay, now let's talk about what probably has been one of the most exciting sectors within the startups in India, that is space tech, right? That was a year of a lot of firsts.
Yeah.
We saw Agnikul Cosmos, inaugurate its private space launch pad along with the Mission Control Center. We had Digantara that launched the smallest and the first commercial space weather sensors into low Earth orbit. And I think right now they're working on object detection as well. The developing space situational awareness architecture as well. Then we had Pixel, which is a Bangalore-based startup that launched 3 hyperspectral satellites, right? Including a recent one named Anand, which was on top of an ISRO rocket. We saw ISRO open up its infrastructure to the private sector, and so much more happening. How do you think this will shape up in
Yeah, I
2023?
think 2022 was the coming of age of space tech. And again, props to ISRO. Props to ISRO for sharing their facilities, for mentoring these startups, and so on. And the amazing thing is, you look at any of these news, releases or media mentions, etc. I mean, all of them have a quote of the ISRO director
Yeah,
on them, right? And that's very heartening to see, and something that the other organizations like DRDO, etc., can take a leaf out of as well, right? Work with startups on this front. I really hope that more people start working on hard tech, on space tech, and so on, right? Because truly, I mean, the challenges that exist in that domain are require some of the smartest of the smartest people to start working on them, I should say.
yeah. So also I recall that last year when the budget was announced, it was mentioned that 30 or 33% of DRDO spending will be going into Indian startups for developing tech. Interesting to see what announcements will be made this year.
I think this whole Build in India, Make in India initiative, right? I mean, they had this Defense Acquisition Council
Right.
and so on. That also is going to spur a lot of spending on Indian companies, per se, indigenous companies. And some of these drone manufacturers, like RF, Idea Forge, etc. They're already working with the government on plenty of these
Right.
initiatives. So yeah,
Then along with space tech, even EV had a great year, right? They have seen a growth of 250% year on year, right? We have seen long range cars come out, and we have had, of course, the two-wheeler market. That was, I mean, that was something, right? It was great, but of course, it was not free of its issues. We did have the
every time you bring up EV, people talk about the thumbnail that we put up where
I
we're
think we
doing
should
this
we should
and
run a poll which has been the best thumbnail of the year. Okay, but despite all of these things, I think the government has really made EV accessible to the masses. We did see the benefits of the FAME subsidies, the FAME 2 subsidies, and the likes. And of course, a lot of people have directly benefited from it.
I think on the EV front, it's it's a confluence of things, right? One, obviously, I mean, petrol being at 100 plus rupees, right? Then the FAME subsidies, which means your two wheelers cost 20, 30K less. Then even on a per unit economic basis, right? Some of at certain mileage, the EVs are more economical to ride, right? So all of your fleets and stuff could be on EVs, uh, right? So bunch of these things have made EVs a lot more lucrative, so much so that despite all of this funding winter and so on, you had positive news, right?
Right.
Aside from the few bikes that exploded in the initial part of the year, right? Hopefully, I mean, that hasn't progressed any further, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that
I mean, there
has
were no news, and I think it's great that it happened in the nascent stages rather than like, when there were a lot more deployments.
true, right? And in some sense, I mean, the chinks have been ironed out, hopefully. And I have this bet ongoing with a friend of mine that by 2030, at least some key segments of the auto industry will be completely EV-fied, right? I'll hold out on that. I think for sure that should happen, especially in all of this like fleets and commutes and those kind of things. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that last mile mobility and for commercial transportation, I think these are the sectors that EV will
Yeah.
really crack into.
This episode of the Startup Operator podcast is brought to you by Park Avenue. Now that we're all back at the office meeting colleagues and clients, it's time to ditch those PJs and look sharp with Park Avenue's range of 100% cotton, wrinkle free shirts. They're super easy to maintain and keep you looking fresh through the day. So, my fellow startup operators, visit the Park Avenue store on myraymond.com and check out the new wrinkle free shirt collection.
So now let's talk about, probably what are the hottest industry, right? Now this industry started off as like that money making thing for folks like me, you, and
Not me.
can't take back your words. From that time, we were actively checking our portfolios, like, okay, how much was the gain this year? And now to that actually like not wanting to check because everything
Speak
is on
for
red.
yourself, Gunjan, not me, right? I just put some money in Ethereum sometime back and
Hmm.
forgot about it, and a bit of Solana as well, right? And that money, I mean, it's probably gone to zero, or I don't even care. Yeah, but yeah, go ahead, talk about your favorite subject, crypto.
Yeah, so we are talking about crypto, right? This has been a very tumultuous time for crypto, especially with what's going on globally. It all started with the destabilization of the Luna coin, the Tether Luna, and which resulted in the meltdown of a lot of crypto hedge funds in the US. Then, as the market was beginning to stabilize in the second half of the year, we saw FTX collapse. And as a result of that, we had a lot of bankruptcies in other crypto companies like BlockFi. In India as well, we see trading volumes across crypto exchanges like WazirX and other companies drop close to 60%. And many are saying this is a direct result of the taxation laws that were implemented from April 1st. What do you think happened? And I think you should check your portfolio once.
No, I couldn't be bothered by it because I have no plans of investing further, at least not for now, right? Well, turns out that crypto behaved like any other asset, right? I mean, during the bull market, people shot up the value of some of these coins and whatnot. And truth be told, right, I was excited by the potential of owning these coins as some sort of equity in a company, right? I mean, which is why I kind of invested in Solana and Polygon as well, right? But it's just way too volatile, man. I mean, it's a problem because the maximalists pitched it as a solution for all ills in the world, right? I mean, it's a currency, it's an asset, it's a technology, it's everything, right?
Right.
I think it's time for sanity to return. It's time for us to understand that hey, if this is an asset, it has to be regulated like an asset. You can't have, at one side mutual funds not even being able to say what returns they offer, right? And simply say mutual funds sahi hai. And at the other end, people are pumping shitcoins and saying buy Doge and buy this for whatever, right? So some of us have paid dearly for that mistake, but hopefully all of us are wiser now. Yeah.
Yep.
This year 2022 I think was a reality check for crypto, I should say.
Yeah, but I mean, one really practical use case which we did see emerge was Bangalore Airport's Digantara, right? I mean, so not only Bangalore Airport, a couple of airports in India, right? And right now it's in the pilot phase. Will be cool to see like how this shapes up.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to those use cases developing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's move on to EdTech. This has been a year where
A year of implosion.
a year of implosions, right? Over 7,500 employees, both contracted and full time, have lost their jobs because of the downsizing that went on. But in positive news, we're seeing the whole EdTech concept also shift. While EdTech was offering, courses online, right now all major EdTech players in the country are looking to open their physical centers. In June 2022, Unacademy announced that they'll be launching 15 offline centers across the country. Upgrad in July said that they'll be opening 5 new physical centers, and Physics Walla, which was I think one of the edtechs that entered the Unicorn Club this year, they opened its
With a
first
$100 million raise.
with a $100 million raise. They opened its first offline center in Kota, which is like wow, the tuition capital of the
So
country.
saying the full circle of edtech, right?
Yeah.
I mean, from away from classrooms to back again in the classrooms. And I think, see, going forward, I think there are three things that will pan out in edtech, right? One is, are you able to sell abroad, right? Even though we have a domestic market, just in terms of economies, if you're able to, sell to the US, sell to Europe, I think you have an undue advantage. That is number one. Number two, are you able to exist with the whole school and college ecosystem, right? Are you able to enable these institutions with curriculum or technology or whatever it is, right? That is the second thing. And number three, is it beyond courses, right? I mean, can you offer mentorship? Can you offer guidance and all of those things? Because again, I'm hearing it from a lot of people that children don't want to, study on screens, right? I mean, they might want to play games and they want to use it for a brief amount of time. They may think of it as complementary, but it's a real challenge. I think these are three things that will determine whether going forward some of these edtech companies really become profitable, sustainable businesses. Because otherwise, I think there's a ton of free content, structured free content at that on YouTube. Colleges are back, and it's just way simpler to go and sit in class and perhaps learn a few things than resist the temptation of opening up Facebook or YouTube or whatever on your iPad or iPhone or any other smart application device, I would say.
Google has been heftily fined by CCI, right, because of its anti-competitive practices.
Hafta.
Hafta. Then we had Amazon, which shut down its edtech and food business in India, and we also saw Twitter, especially after the year they've had with Elon Musk, with the buyouts and everything. Now, what do you make of all of these things? What's happening in this giant tech space?
See, I think the highlight of this year was very clearly understanding from the Twitter files that FBI was basically running Twitter, right? And if they were running Twitter, they were running Facebook and YouTube and Google and the others, right? For sure, right? So imagine that level of influence on a social media platform, right? I mean, we all kind of guessed it, but I think that, making it clear, Twitter files, just aired it in the open that this is a reality, right? So I think the trust in some of these platforms is at an all-time low, I would say, right? Aside from that, I used to always hear this trope, right? This was relevant maybe 10 years back, and a former VC you would always present this saying that the Google of India is Google, Facebook of India is Facebook, and so on and so forth. I think that might see a serious challenge going forward, right? Not to say that somebody will build the Google for India or whatever, but I think you will see a sort of carving up of some of those products and businesses, making it a lot more local, vernacular, and so on. So that will be interesting. And of course, the Competition Council of India cracking down on Google after they announced that 30% via Google payments only policy, right? That I think to me was long due, right? Some of these large companies have very opaque practices, right? Have very funny accounting, very tardy support systems, and so on. And being the country with perhaps the largest developer base, I think we should definitely negotiate and make sure that we're able to leverage that skill base, that population, everything for better returns from these folks, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, and now that COVID is making a return, right? Let's revisit these conversations around the great resignation, the great return to work. A quick run through of some of the policies that really impacted the growth of the Indian startup ecosystem. We had the Make in India and Atmanirbhar Bharat programs, where India is trying to seed and grow several new industries such as the electronics, semiconductors, manufacturing, renewable resources, right? I think that will give a huge boost to a different type of startups in the coming year.
We had
Then,
a $5 billion allocation, I think, for chips, right? Even though, I mean, 5 billion is relatively less for the amount that we need, but it's a significant first step for sure.
Mhm. Then, most recently, the Indian government also designated the Minister of Electronics and Information Technology as the nodal ministry to oversee the country's nascent but growing online gaming industry, right? And I think that we'll see the impact of that
Yeah.
as we progress
As
this
long
year.
as we get rid of the ambiguity, I think the founders will be very happy on that front, right? I mean, you define the black and white so that they don't need to operate in the gray.
Yeah. So, and in the last budget session, we did see, our finance minister use the word startup a lot, right? And this year has proved, despite the headwinds, how much the
Not just startup, right? I mean, Balaji Srinivasan noted that our budget presentation was so tech heavy, right? I mean, you had blockchain, drones, so many things, right, being mentioned. So that was heartening, issue.
anything else that we missed out?
Quite a few come to mind. I think the national logistics policy is pretty interesting. We covered a bit of this, when we spoke to the founder of Blackbuck, co-founder Subbu. Right, do check out that episode. Then the new drone policy. Of course, if you want to understand more about that, catch the episode with Ankit of Idea Forge.
With
And
the
then
data protection bill as
the
well.
data protection bill for sure. And then RBI, uh, you know, struck down on all of these BNPL guys, right?
Oh, yes.
That was some interesting policy making. UPI, UPI 2.0 that was announced, which is tending more towards financial management and so on. So quite a lot of stuff, right? I mean, this is why I kind of feel that this whole trifecta of startup innovation, industrial policy, and capital being available coming to a head, right? I mean, there's a strange confluence of these things that is making the Indian startup ecosystem so much more viable and vibrant.
Well, I think that's a very great segue to our Park Avenue PowerPoint, right? You recently tweeted that you're old enough to remember when people rejected startup ideas because Google could easily build it,
Yeah.
right? And well, that is wrong.
Well,
Tell
how
us about
much
it.
wrong is the question, right? I mean, because and I was just thinking about it when Google shut down its Stadia. I mean, I remembered it that at that time, but this used to be standard explanation, right? Somehow, I mean, 15 years back or even 10 years back, investors always thought that Google could build any internet product, which is definitely not turned out to be true. In fact, it's pretty, it's on the other side. I can't think of the last product
Yeah,
that
major
Google
innovation which Google did.
invented or launched that we're like really using it.
So, Roshan, tell us about some of the first few episodes of 2023.
We're going to start with a blockbuster episode with Sarvana of Kovai. Well, people have a hard time running one product. Sarvana has four products, right? And Kovai is completely bootstrapped to about 10 million plus ARR, and 200% team based out of London and Coimbatore. Fantastic startup, right? And very wide-ranging conversation on what it takes to execute in SaaS. Do check that out. We also have Pramod, who is the co-founder of Unbox Robotics. This whole fulfillment, supply chain space as such is extremely interesting. A lot of investments have gone into that. Amazon with Kiva Robotics and so on and so forth. So I spoke to him about what it takes to build a hardware startup as such, and we covered a few of these nuances on that. So two very good episodes coming up.
Awesome. So now, before we quickly wrap up this episode, your top three predictions for 2023.
Not predictions, but general thoughts as such, right? So one is, I think Indian startups are a genie out of a bottle situation. I've said this before multiple times as well. I think we have this confluence of many things coming together that makes us, as lucrative a place as any in the world, right? So you're going to see a lot more amazing startups coming out, and this will be irrespective of financial cycles, right? Irrespective of boom or bust. So don't get swayed by the funding news or the funding winter, as they call it, etc. Startup innovation will continue unabated, right? And there is this whole process of creative destruction. So if people are not able to raise funds and are not able to build a sustainable business, well, the next version of them will do that, right? So that is number one. Number two, it's not all doom and gloom. I think, considering that $16 billion or so of VC capital has been raised, this is going to find itself into the market sometime, right? If not 2023, definitely 2024. My personal feeling is that by late 2023, we're going to see a lot more of this, right? So, and aside from that, as Gunjan mentioned earlier, early stage activity has continued unabated, right? That's the number two. Number three, I think we have a situation where industrial policy is finally mirroring some of this startup action. We just covered a whole segment on that, right? And you're going to see the government sort of actively encourage startup action going further as well, right? I know, I mean, a lot of startup founders often say that ease of doing business is one of those factors that has to be simplified and so on. I think the government should have a look at it and perhaps simplify that a little more further, make capital access a little more easier, and so on. So those are my three thoughts going into this year, Gunjan.
Perfect. Folks, let us know what you think.
And just a bonus, as you saw space tech action in the last year, you're going to see a lot more unconventional, unsexy industries like drones and space. Sexy for us, but let's say they're not like fintech hot types, right? I mean, you're going to see a lot of these other sectors, right? Not unsexy, but unconventional sectors like drones and space tech and biotech, and those kind of companies do a lot more innovation in this year, I think.
Yeah. Well, folks, let us know in the comments as to what you think, how the ecosystem will shape up. We'll definitely take a look at it and probably will discuss that in the next roundup. But thanks so much for joining us. Once again, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, do subscribe and also do like the video and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. A lot of exciting things coming up from our side as well in 2023. Yeah. So keep on listening to us and sharing our content.
Thank you so much for being with us this year. I mean, it really means a lot. I think we've been doing this for about 2 years and 9 months so far, 9 or 10 months so far. Yeah. Going to be 3 years.
Reaching a 100th roundup episode.
100th roundup. It's going to be 3 years in February or March, I think. And we really enjoy bringing these things to you. As I hope that you guys enjoy listening to and watching our content as well.
So that's it, folks, for this roundup. We'll see you again in the next one. And Happy New Year.